In the quiet town of Silver Pines, authority was rarely questioned. Most people kept their heads down, avoided trouble, and learned quickly that silence made life easier. But one calm morning, that unspoken balance shifted. Inside a small roadside diner, a newcomer sat alone with his disciplined dog, unnoticed at first, assumed to be just another traveler passing through. What no one realized was that this man, Daniel Hayes, had spent years in structured service, learning patience, restraint, and the value of observation over reaction. He hadn't come to prove anything, only to find peace in a slower rhythm of life. As sunlight filtered through the windows and the familiar scent of coffee filled the room, the atmosphere felt ordinary, almost comforting. Yet beneath that calm, tension quietly lingered. When local officers entered, their presence subtly changed the energy of the space, not through force, but through expectation. Conversations softened, movements slowed, and eyes instinctively looked away. A minor incident followed, brief and seemingly accidental, but enough to test character rather than strength. Daniel didn't raise his voice, and his dog remained composed, guided by trust rather than impulse. In that small moment, without confrontation or spectacle, something important became clear. True control isn't loud, and integrity doesn't need permission. Sometimes, the strongest response is simply refusing to be provoked and letting truth reveal itself on its own. Marcus slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes were calm, impossible to read. His under the table, he said evenly. The uniformed man seemed more irritated by Marcus's tone than by defiance itself. He tilted his head, studying him, as if reconsidering. For a brief moment, the tension thickened. Then he stepped back with a shrug and a thin smile. Just saying, "Things happen," he muttered before moving away. The spilled coffee cooled on the floor. Almost immediately, Nora appeared with napkins, kneeling to clean it up without being asked. Her movements were quick and efficient, though her hands trembled slightly. Marcus noticed. So did Rex. Around them, the diner slowly returned to life. But something felt different. Voices stayed low. Eyes looked away. No one mentioned what had happened. This wasn't politeness. It was caution. The two men settled near the front, filling the space as if it belonged to them. Their voices grew loud again. Marcus gently rested his hand on Rex's neck, calming him. The dog remained alert, still and watchful. Marcus studied the room. He realized the town wasn't unfriendly or rude. It was trained. Silence wasn't kindness. It was survival. When the men finally left without paying, the diner seemed to exhale. Sounds returned slowly, like everyone was convincing themselves that nothing unusual had occurred. Later, Marcus approached the counter quietly, thanking Nora for her kindness. Her eyes briefly flicked toward the door before meeting his again. That single glance said more than words. A young boy appeared, tugging softly at her apron. He moved carefully, used to staying unnoticed. Nora's expression softened instantly. It wasn't fear that kept her careful. It was responsibility. Marcus left a little extra on the counter, not as charity, but as respect. As he stepped outside, an older man spoke from nearby. "You're not from around here." Marcus confirmed it. The man nodded. "Then remember this. Around here, it's safer not to stand out." Outside, Marcus paused, looking back through the window. He had come seeking peace. But peace, he realized, sometimes depends on who chooses to stay. He got into his vehicle, then turned the engine off. He wasn't leaving today. In the quiet town of Red Hollow, people rarely ask questions. Things happened quietly, almost invisibly, as if everyone had learned to look away. Noah Carter noticed at the moment he arrived. A former service member who chose a peaceful life. He came seeking silence, not conflict. But patterns don't lie. Subtle exchanges, forced smiles, eyes lowered in the presence of authority. Instead of confronting anyone, Noah observed. Alongside his trained dog, Orion, he began recording routines, meetings, repeated behaviors. Nothing violent, nothing dramatic, just facts. Over time, those small details formed a clear pattern. This wasn't about one person abusing power. It was something deeper, more organized. Noah understood then that truth doesn't rush. It waits. It survives through patience and quiet consistency. And in Red Hollow, without a single shout or scene, something shifted. The fear was still there, but it no longer ruled everything. He never raised his voice. He never moved forward. He simply watched the officers long enough for them to understand that whatever would happen next would not be loud, but it would be final. Officer Daniel Moore reacted first. The confidence on his face faded into something tighter, more cautious. He adjusted his uniform and stepped closer, trying to regain control of the room. "All right," he said calmly, scanning the diner. "That's enough for today." He turned toward Lucas Reed. "You'll need to come with us." Lucas met his gaze without hesitation. Up close, the officer looked younger than his authority suggested. He wasn't cruel by nature, just obedient. And that, Lucas knew, could be dangerous in its own way. "On what grounds?" Lucas asked quietly. There was a pause, then an answer that sounded rehearsed. "Disturbing the peace and failure to control an animal." At Lucas's side, Rex, his trained German shepherd, stood alert but silent. The leash trembled slightly with restrained energy. "Sit," Lucas whispered. The dog obeyed instantly. That level of control unsettled the room. This wasn't instinct. It was training. Another officer, Michael Grant, stepped behind Lucas and secured his wrists. The cuffs were tighter than necessary, but Lucas did not resist. The diner slowly exhaled, believing the tension was over. A woman near the counter, Emily Parker, watched silently, guilt written across her face. Lucas caught her eyes and gently shook his head, a silent way of saying this isn't your fault. As Lucas was escorted outside, Rex resisted for a moment, confused but loyal. With a final command, the dog stayed behind, led away by animal control officers who handled him carefully. The ride to the station was quiet. Lucas observed everything: turns, timing, details. This wasn't fear. It was awareness. Inside a small interview room, the cuffs were removed. Minutes later, Sheriff Thomas Hale entered. A man used to authority, to being obeyed without question. "You caused unnecessary attention," the sheriff said. "I stopped someone from being harmed," Lucas replied evenly. The sheriff leaned closer. "This town doesn't welcome outsiders creating problems." "I wasn't armed," Lucas said calmly. The sheriff smiled thinly. "Your dog is." Silence followed. Then the offer came. "Leave town. No charges. Your dog returned safely." Lucas studied the man for a moment, then nodded. "All right," he said, "but release my dog first." Satisfied, the sheriff turned away. That's when Lucas spoke again. "There's something you should know," he said quietly. "The camera on my dog was never turned off." The room froze. Lucas explained calmly. A live, encrypted feed had been recording everything, audio included, since the diner. And if he didn't check in soon, the footage would be automatically forwarded. For the first time, uncertainty appeared on the sheriff's face. Morning arrived quietly in Riverbend. Lucas stood outside the station, free. Rex sat calmly at his side, unharmed. Soon after, state and federal investigators arrived. Professional, composed, and precise. Evidence was reviewed. Conversations once thought private were now undeniable. There was no chaos, no shouting, just accountability. By midday, the town felt different. At the diner, laughter returned, cautious at first, then real. People stood closer together. Fear loosened its grip. Emily unlocked the diner doors with steady hands. Her child sat nearby, safe, unaware of how much had changed. Lucas didn't stay. By afternoon, he was gone, driving toward a quiet life he never stopped believing in. Behind him, Riverbend breathed again, not because someone used force, but because the truth arrived. Sometimes, miracles aren't loud. They don't arrive with thunder or fire. Sometimes, they come quietly, when patience outlasts fear, and courage chooses truth over silence. In the weeks that followed, Riverbend seemed to return to its usual rhythm. Customers returned to the diner, some more confident than others, while a few still cast furtive glances behind them, as if checking that nothing had changed. But Lucas knew the calm was only superficial. The kind of silent control he had observed and documented doesn't disappear easily. He moved cautiously, Rex walking at his side, ears and nose alert to every detail. Outside, the town presented the same ordinary facade. Children playing on the sidewalks, delivery trucks rumbling down the main streets, cats stretching lazily on windowsills. But for Lucas, every conversation, every gesture, every silence could reveal something. Rex's camera, though discreet, had already captured hundreds of hours of movement, routines, and micro-expressions. What no one knew was that this live feed was forming a complete puzzle of Riverbend's invisible hierarchy. One afternoon, while returning to the diner for a coffee, he noticed something strange. A white van parked near the corner had remained stationary for hours. A man, seemingly ordinary, wearing dark glasses and a buttoned shirt, consulted a notebook while glancing around. Lucas slowed down, observing from the shadow of a tree. Rex froze, growling softly. "Nothing goes unnoticed," Lucas murmured, stroking the dog. The man noticed nothing. But Lucas understood that this presence was no accident. He pulled out his phone and activated a silent protocol, an encrypted signal sent to a trusted contact, along with live images from Rex. Precision and attention to detail were now his greatest weapons. Later, inside the diner, Emily served coffee with a more relaxed smile. Lucas sat down, but his eyes scanned the room, capturing the posture of every person, the behavior of every server. Nothing alarming, but something felt off. Conversations ended just a little too quickly when someone entered. Glances were cast furtively. Hands trembled slightly when people tried to appear natural. Riverbend's calm was no longer innocent. That night, Lucas and Rex left the town for an isolated location, where he decrypted hours of video and audio. What he discovered exceeded his expectations. A subtle network of control, extensive, where small acts of surveillance, silent warnings, and seemingly ordinary gestures kept the population in near-unconscious compliance. Officials, shopkeepers, even some influential civilians were all involved, either willingly or out of fear. Lucas now knew that simply exposing these facts would be enough to transform the town. But he also knew that violence or chaos would change nothing. As always, patience and strategy would be his allies. In the days that followed, he did what he did best. He observed, documented, and waited. He intervened only when real danger arose, always with calm and precision. A minor altercation erupted in the industrial district when an employee overstepped his bounds with a subordinate. Lucas didn't act immediately, but Rex's camera captured everything. The evidence was clear: abuse of power and intimidation, systematic. Then came the day the state and federal agents arrived. Lucas had prepared a complete, irrefutable dossier. The first meeting in the town hall was silent but intense. Local officials, accustomed to unquestioned obedience, now faced an undeniable reality. Their invisible control network had been exposed, not through force, but by the steady consistency of meticulous observation. The mayor of Riverbend, visibly shaken, attempted to deny some of the accusations. But Lucas remained calm, citing every event, every microdetail recorded by Rex's camera. No shouting, no ultimatums, just truth, unyielding, inevitable. In the following weeks, Riverbend changed. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. Residents began to speak more, ask questions, and make decisions for themselves. Local authorities were replaced or trained to behave transparently. Civilians regained trust, realizing that silent control was not the norm. Lucas, meanwhile, watched from a distance. The diner, the main streets, the parks, all seemed to breathe a new air. Emily still opened her cafe with the same smile, but now her eyes shone with serenity instead of caution. Nora continued her meticulous service, but without the constant tension that had accompanied her before. Children played, laughing, without fear of watchful eyes. And Lucas, he did not stay for thanks or to monitor the town long-term. He had accomplished what he came to do: prove that patience, consistency, and silent courage could change an entire community without raising a voice. As he left Riverbend, Rex calmly at his side, Lucas reflected on the lesson he had just taught, to himself and to others. Sometimes, the greatest strength does not lie in dramatic action, but in careful attention, integrity, and quiet determination. And in that truth, the world can change, gently, surely, silently. If this story touched you, share it with someone who needs hope today. Thank you for listening. And remember, truth, spoken calmly, is stronger than fear.